Hello, my name is Adam John Richardson. Let's walk through the basic installation and use of the GitHub Desktop client. First things first, why might we be using this tool? Well, you're probably wanting to use Git, which is an open source distributed version control system. That's a fancy way of saying this is an application that is free. The code's out there for anyone to contribute to or to read. And it allows us to manage changes or track changes to files. As we make edits, it shows who made the edit, why they made the edit, and also allows us to revert our changes. If we make a mistake and we think, we broke something, let's go back to the earlier state. Or it allows us to merge our work, our changes, with the work of other people. Now, GitHub is an online service that makes it easy for us to put our Git repositories online. We don't need to manage any of the sysadmin work related to this. It's done for us. Okay, now we know about GitHub and Git. As a reminder, why might we use the desktop client? Typically, a lot of students who are getting started with coding also want to track their changes. And I'll say this, if you're trying to learn too much at once, too many different subjects, it can make it a bit harder. It's a heavy lift. I think the GUI interface that's provided by the GitHub Desktop client is very helpful to people who are just getting started. Focus your time and your effort on learning how to code whatever language you might be working on. And then use this desktop client until such time that you feel comfortable, hey, I'm ready to start working more in the command line. So first things first, let's download this. I'm just going to hit the button here. And notice I save it. And once it's downloaded, we'll install. Now it's going to do some work. We'll see what happens. And voila! It says, let's get started. Add a repository to GitHub Desktop to start collaborating. Now, you'll notice I already have some repos that I have up in GitHub that it's showing there. What you didn't see, because I had already installed this on a previous occasion, I uninstalled for the sake of the demonstration, it did ask me to log in on a previous screen. Typically, what you'll do is either you can create the account then, or you can continue the process and log in with an existing account, or you can temporarily skip it. I just logged in with my existing account, and this is your account at GitHub. Now, I have my account set up. It sees all my repos. Let's actually create a new repository on my local hard drive. So I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to say Python practice, because let's say we're practicing Python. And the description, a nice place to store my Python practice code. Notice it prompts me with a local path that makes a lot of sense. Documents, /GitHub. And then I actually have to decide, do I want to check this box, initialize this repository with a README? Most of the time I say, go ahead and do that. A README is just a markdown file that describes your project. And when it's posted to GitHub, Markdown is rendered as HTML, and so you have this beautiful file that describes your project. Do I want to ignore anything? That just means, should Git, behind the scenes, should it not include changes or updates to some perhaps hidden files? Every operating system's different. You have your preferences. In this case, I'm not going to worry about it. License, I will change it to, well, I won't change it, but I'll show you. I could put it, I typically set most of my code as an MIT license. MIT is a license which generally says, hey, you can use this for anything. But since this is just a repo for playing around, I'll keep it unlicensed. The good news is if you change your mind, you can always go back and change those settings, the git ignore, the license, etc. So I'm going to create the repository. Ta-da! We see it here. It doesn't look like much yet, but let's go ahead and first things first, let's make a change to a file that's in that repository. So I'm going to go find this repository. Remember, we stored it in Documents, GitHub, Python Practice. And I'll show you here. Notice it created, here's the Git attributes. That is a hidden file that tells Git how to handle certain things. And here's the README. I'm going to double click this. And it automatically, on my system, opens up with VS Code, which is a great tool. If you don't have something already installed for this, I recommend just downloading VS Code. Now, notice here is a £, and then it says Python Practice. It automatically generated this markdown file. What it does is it says, here's an H1. Remember, if you aren't familiar with Markdown, £1 renders as an H1 header in HTML. It's the title of this whole document. And notice down below is the description. It's going to render as a paragraph. I'm going to change a few things. I'm going to get rid of that space, and I'm going to hit the return here and put a space in between my title and the next paragraph. And I might even add one more paragraph, or, well, sentence, but we'll call it a paragraph. Let's say something to the effect, I hope to become a better programmer. We'll leave it at that. Now, I'm going to save this. Let's go back to our, oh, look, our desktop client now shows in its interface the changes I made to that README file. Notice in red it says a nice place to store my Python practice code. Notice there's a -sign in front. That's gone. Something's changed. Well, that line has changed. I got rid of the space. I added an additional return after that. So there's a new line. And additionally, there's another new line and another paragraph down below in green. The green represents the most recent changes. I can commit this to my local repository. I'm just going to put in a quick line here, added general info. Basically, that's all I did. You could write a longer description, whatever works for your particular use case, the context you're working within. I'm going to commit to main. That's just the main repository I'm working with right now. We don't need to get any more complex than that. And voila, that's committed. I can look at my history, and here I see this was the initial commit. And you can see that was the green. That's the new stuff in the initial commit. Here's where I actually made those changes. The initial commit was done for me when this desktop client auto-generated a README file. And this is what was added. And then I made those changes using VS Code. And now the desktop client says, hey, we'll manage these changes. If I wanted to revert back to the original, I could. But let's show you something even cooler. Notice it says publish to the repository. Publish repository to GitHub. I have the name here. I have the description, and it's checked to keep this code private. That just determines, can other people see it? I'm going to hit publish. And drum roll. There, it's published. Now, we can actually see this button here that says View on GitHub. Voila! We now see our beautiful, wonderful README file as part of this repository. It's all up here. If I were to add other files to this repository, they would show up above. And if I click any one in particular file, it actually shows that specific file. And notice I could download it here. You have a lot of features all at your disposal. All we're focused on is the general idea here to install the desktop client and then keep track of your changes and have the ability to publish this repository to GitHub. You can now share this repo with other people. You could either make it public or just add specific access to particular people. And it makes it, honestly, it's a wonderful tool to have at your disposal as you're learning how to code. I hope this helps, and I'll see you in future videos. Bye.